Proverbs chapter 3. The key phrase for this chapter is, He shall direct thy paths. My son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments. For length of days, and long life, and peace shall they add to thee. I love it when you get a Bible verse with a promise. Solomon wants the men reading this to reap the benefits of the promises, but that won't happen if they forget what he's telling them. Throughout Proverbs, he sends this message. Don't forget what I'm telling you. Solomon is presenting his wisdom as law, and the things he tells us to do are not suggestions. They're commandments. You've heard of the 10 Commandments? Now you've got some more to follow if you want to be wise. Doing so yields 3 cool benefits. Really good, fulfilled days, long life, and peace. Let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck. Write them upon the table of thine heart. So shalt thou find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man. Solomon's first 2 commandments, after telling us to pay attention, are to be merciful and truthful. He wants these 2 traits to become stamped into our DNA. If they are, we reap 2 benefits. God and the people down here in our personal universe will look at us favorably and realize we have understanding, good understanding. I want people on earth to know I have good understanding when it comes to training singers. The requirement for me to get this is to be merciful and truthful. I've rarely met anyone who fully understands the wonderful truth found in verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. God doesn't say that he will direct you, but rather that he will direct your paths as long as you trust and acknowledge him. He further emphasizes that we are not to rely on our own understanding of our unique situations. The hidden truth here is that God is directing us by directing our path. Don't look for an email or a personal appearance from God to show you what direction to take in life. To understand how verses 5 and 6 work, it's helpful to jump ahead to Proverbs chapter 21, verse 1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He turns it whithersoever he will. How does he do this? It's simple. If he wants you to turn right, he does one of 2 things. He either makes turning right so attractive that turning any other direction would seem foolish, or he makes turning any other direction so unappealing that turning right is the only option that makes sense. Here's some cool art that I created that beautifully illustrates this point. I'll give you a personal example of how he guided me into a successful real estate venture. God knows I like living in a nice residence. I have a strong artistic sense, and while granite counters and impeccable interior design might not matter to other people, it matters to me. I also like to surf. When I decided to move my teaching business closer to the beach, I scoured the town of San Clemente looking for a home to rent that I could teach out of. I finally found the perfect place, a charming ocean view duplex, but the owner, a local developer named Jim Glover, wasn't returning my phone calls. Over and over I called, and every time he either wasn't available or when I left a message, didn't get back to me. I was determined to rent this place, and to my delight, finally I reached him. The first thing he said was, I've gotten all of your messages, but I just sold the building to someone else. If you want to rent it, you'll have to talk to him. I immediately contacted the new owner and got a surprising response. Instead of renting, he asked me if I wanted to take over his deal with Glover and purchase the property. I didn't have enough money to do it myself, but I knew some friends that needed a tax write-up. I contacted them, they agreed. My parents loaned me the money for my portion of the down payment, and we got the loan approved and everything was ready to go. I was to live in the 1,100 square foot upstairs unit, and they were going to live in the 800 square foot downstairs unit. Keep in mind this took months of my time to set up, and I had no other options. Ads were coming out for my vocal coaching business shortly after the close of escrow, so I had to be moved in as planned. We had one final meeting set up with Jim Glover where he was supposed to sign off his interest in the property, and the first thing he said was, I hope you're not planning to move into the upstairs unit. I just moved my pregnant daughter into that space, and if you try to boot her out, I'm not signing anything and the deal is off. I about fell out of my chair. Unbridled anger nearly took over my entire being. You know I have to start teaching in just a few days. What do you mean I can't move in? "How could you do this to me?" I yelled. At this point, it would be easy to think that God had let me down, but such was not the case. Jim had a 1,700 square foot townhome in a much better location that had just become available. It was a short walk from the pier and had a nice ocean view, a much better ocean view than the duplex. I took one look inside and realized his pregnant daughter had just done me a big favor. Turns out Jim had sold this property to a couple using what's called a land contract. The day before our meeting, the people that were living there left without a trace, with no explanation. He offered to rent it to me really cheap so I could afford to rent my upstairs unit at the duplex to his daughter. A few months later, my business started really picking up, and I needed more tax write-offs. So I asked Jim if he would like to sell me the townhome. He was happy to sell it to me for what he owed on it. And here's the kicker. I had just bought his duplex, so my credit was maxed out. There was no way I was going to qualify for the financing needed to buy the townhome, so Jim told me he would co-sign for me to get the loan, then quitclaim the deed to me the day after we closed escrow. For those of you reading this that know anything about real estate, you know this sort of thing never happens. I put a few improvements into this property and sold it for almost double what I paid for it a few months later. Shortly after that, I sold the duplex and made enough money from that deal and a few others to build a 6,350 square foot home right in front of my favorite surf break, where I lived for 9 years. Not too long ago, the home I built sold for $4.5 million. Was it coincidence that I picked that particular duplex to rent? Was it coincidence that Jim Glover didn't return my calls? Was it coincidence that the first buyer backed out? Was it coincidence that I happened to have 2 friends that needed a tax write-off? Was it coincidence that Glover moved his pregnant daughter into the upstairs unit knowing I was planning to move there? Was it coincidence that the couple buying the 1,700 square foot townhome skipped town the day before our meeting? Was it coincidence that I would buy a townhome from someone that would actually sell it to me for what they owed on it and then co-sign for me? Was it dumb luck that I made a few improvements and sold the townhome for nearly twice what I paid for it in just a few months? A reasonable mind would have to say no. Clearly, I was being guided. I've learned 2 things from this experience. Number 1, as long as I know I'm trusting God for helping me achieve the goals in my life, I don't panic if the route to the top has a few unexpected twists and turns. Number 2, you can't make a wrong turn when you're trusting in God. He forced me out of that duplex kicking and screaming. I agreed to go to the townhome because I had no other choice. God's angels made me turn when I was trying with everything I had to go straight. I learned that when I trust God, I'm not piloting the ship anymore. He's the one making me turn left, right, or go straight ahead. I can't tell you what peace of mind this truth has given me throughout the course of my lifetime. I've had other situations in life that would appear to others watching me to look like my life was falling apart. But after the dust cleared in every case, I came out ahead. My life often reminds me of God acting like a grandmaster chess player sacrificing a bishop in what would look like a stupid mistake. I'm in the middle of the game, tempted to think, hey, you just threw away an important piece. How could you do that? Soon, though, I get to see how the bishop's sacrifice results in a checkmate for me, and I win the game. Since God doesn't tell us what He's doing in our lives, it does take faith to know you're on the right track. But after a lifetime of seeing Him come through for me over and over again, it does, or it should, get easier to know I'm always on the winning path. Lesson learned, trust in the Lord. Don't rely on your own understanding. And enjoy the pleasure of walking through life on a directed path. Verse 7, be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It shall be health to thy navel and marrow to thy bones. Isn't the whole point of the book of Proverbs to become wise? Why then would Solomon say that we shouldn't, in our own opinion, consider ourselves to be wise? Because the wisdom we possess doesn't come from us. It's like a beginning chess player that wins every game because a grandmaster is telling him where to move. Wouldn't it be kind of stupid for the beginner to start thinking he was a hot chess player? The beginner likely learns a few good moves in the process, but the grandmaster is really the good player. The grandmaster can see far ahead and knows exactly what chess strategy to adopt for every move made by an opponent. Once again, Solomon comes back to fearing God as the prerequisite for having a healthy and strong life, which of course is only going to happen if you're making wise decisions, which comes from the Creator of heaven and earth. Verse 9, Honor the Lord with thy substance, and with the firstfruits of all thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. Verse 9 starts getting at a fringe benefit of wisdom. Wealth. I like having my barns filled with plenty. Why would God have us give money or increase away to get ahead? To teach us that it doesn't come from us. Now here's the secret to becoming wealthy. Let's face it, most of you reading this would like to be wealthy, but you're not. Have you read the top shelf books about getting financial freedom? I have, but I've yet to read any self-help book that gets it right when it comes to becoming wealthy. The title of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill sums up the general premise of most authors attempting to show you their take on how to increase your net worth. Dream it, write it down, draft a plan, and take action. I don't deny that it's good to think positively about your direction in life, but as we've learned from Proverbs, if your lifestyle and choices aren't pleasing to God, you ain't going to get the brass ring. Money will not flow like a river into your savings account, but no one tells you this. Many of you reading this have tried dreaming big, then writing down financial goals like, in 1 year, I will have $100,000 in my checking account, or I will have 50 new accounts in 6 months or less time. You've recited your goals, focused on your dream, and like Jim Carrey, written huge checks to yourself, carry around in your wallet, hoping to someday cash. But you're still unsuccessful and broke. What's the secret of the wealthy? It's actually pretty simple. Becoming wealthy for a godly man can be reduced to a 4-step process. Number 1, obey God's commandments. Number 2, create a wealth goal and a plan to achieve it. Number 3, act on your plan. And here's the key. Number 4, tithe on your profit. If you observe to do the commandments of the Lord, the Bible says you will be blessed by God. This is Deuteronomy 28 in full force. Obey God's laws and He blesses what you do to earn money. One of the things He says to do is tithe, and that's where many men miss the mark. The most famous tithe verse in the Bible is in the book of Malachi, chapter 3, verse 10. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. Prove me now herewith is code for put me to the test. Coming from the mouth of God, that's a bold statement. It's clear He really wants to bless tithers. I think this verse seals it. If you tithe, monetary blessings are coming your way, and not just a little. Pour you out a blessing that there shall not be room enough to receive it is pretty clear. Tithe, and you'll be so busy making money, you won't be able to handle all of the work coming to you. Over the years, I have found that many of the richest people in the world began their lives with a habit of tithing. This is by Robert Kiyosaki, an investor, a businessman, self-help, motivational speaker, and best-selling author. What's a tithe? A tithe is, according to most biblical scholars, a tenth. You give a tenth of your profit back to a church, or if your church doesn't need the money, you give it to someone who does to show God you know who's giving you the income. The point is, you give away money as an act of faith. Meat in mine house is code for the people running the church have plenty to eat and drink. They're taken care of by your tithe. Notice that a tithe should be a tenth of your profit, not your income. For example, let's say you make and sell sandals. Here are your monthly expenses. $20,000 materials, $20,000 labor, hired help to make the sandals, $5,000 rent, and $50,000 gross revenue from sales. $1,000 income taxes, $4,000 profit, and a $400 tithe. I think it's clear if you as a sandal maker tithe on your gross revenue, your tithe would reduce your profit to zero. God understands how business works. It's the profit that's tithable. The profit is your income, which is different than the business gross revenue. There were no taxes when tithing was initiated, so in our lives, I would call taxes an expense, but you're welcome to tithe more than 10% of your profit. Wealthy individuals can find themselves in a 50% tax bracket, which means if they earn $100,000 profit from work, tithe $10,000 and give $50,000 for federal and state taxes, their tithe would be at 20% of their net. It's up to you to decide where to draw the line, but take the time to put a tithing system in place, and God will take the time to ensure your business makes a profit and then some. Tithing on a foundation of obedience to God's laws is a 100% foolproof, rock-solid, dependable way to ensure that whatever you decide to do in life to make money will be greatly blessed. Keep track of your profits so you can tithe accurately. Not that long ago, the flow of new students from my vocal coaching business came to an abrupt halt. For decades, I was getting 10 calls a week and booking 3 to 4 new clients every week. But in 2 months, I only had 1 new client and only a couple of calls. At first I was baffled, but the light came on one morning after I prayed and asked God to help me get back up to speed. After double-checking my tithing for the last 9 months, I found a big mistake and discovered I'd missed $23,600 of profit that I should have tithed on. I had shortchanged God $2,360 without knowing it. I immediately sent off an online payment of $2,360 to Calvary Chapel Church in Rancho Santa Margarita, California. The next week, I booked 3 new clients, got 5 calls from new clients, booked a big music video production project. My stock portfolio skyrocketed to higher than it's ever been, and I discovered a brilliant and effective internet marketing strategy for my business that will likely make me a lot of money. All of this happened within a few days of getting my tithe up to date. The big lesson I learned is that intending to tithe accurately doesn't hold much water. I've got to be very careful about calculating the profit from my business and investments. God pays much closer attention to my income than I had thought. The Bible is clear, bring ye all of the tithes into the storehouse, not some of the tithes. And it's up to me to be on my accounting game to know the difference. This experience was sobering because I realized how seriously God takes tithing. But at the same time, it was a real faith strengthener for me. I knew God was close by, hearing my prayers, and he was attentive to what's going on in my life. I once heard an interview with one of the sons of John D. Rockefeller, who was at one time the richest man in America. The younger Rockefeller grew up in Tarrytown, New York, at a home area called Kikuit. Kikuit is the centrally located crown jewel of Rockefeller's 3,400-acre estate. The main house is 6 stories high, along with 2 basement floors. The landscaping was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, the same landscape architect that designed Central Park. To this day, the gardens are meticulously maintained. The gardens are terraced and include a morning garden, grand staircase, Japanese garden, an Italian garden, a Japanese-style brook, a Japanese tea house, a huge oceanus fountain, a temple of Aphrodite, loggia, and a semicircular rose garden. The Rockefeller estate has a 9-hole golf course, a 50-room mansion, just one of 11 homes, and over 80 miles of trails and carriage roads. The interviewer asked Rockefeller if it was difficult growing up in such a different world from everyone else. He replied with a grin, "It was great!" Then the interviewer asked him if there was any secret to the success behind his family accumulation of money and property, to which he replied, "My father taught us that when we earn $10, we always give back $1 to God. We tithed our 10th, and as far as I know, that was the reason why God blessed us with a lot of money. I never would have been able to tithe the first $1 million I ever made if I had not tithed my first salary, which was $1.50 per week. God gave me my money. I believe the power to make money is a gift from God. John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller Jr. was a prudent father when it came to matters of money with his 5 sons. According to son Nelson, we got 25 cents a week and had to earn the rest of the money we got. To earn part of that extra money, he raised vegetables and rabbits. We always worked, according to Nelson. All the boys were required to keep personal daily account books. They were required to give 10% of their income to charity, to save 10%, and to account for all the rest. They had to balance their account books every month and to be able to tell what happened to every penny they earned. Rockefeller wanted his kids to understand money. He taught them a specific pattern for dealing with their money. There's a lot of wisdom in what he did. The necessity for work. When you earn it, you value it. The importance of charity. Give away the first 10%. The need for saving. Pay yourself the next 10%. The power of accountability. Account for every penny. Of course you have to act on your plan to become wealthy, which will likely mean lots of hard work. But it's nice to know that if you follow the 4-step process I presented for obtaining wealth, that God is there every step of the way, ensuring your success. He has to, because he always honors his word, and his word says he will pour you out a blessing if you tithe. What he doesn't say is when the blessing comes pouring down. You might get lucky and realize a windfall moments after you tithe, but it could take longer. It's something I don't like, but in life, God lets you slide right to the edge of your financial cliff, and as you're going over the edge with nothing to stop your fall, at the last second, his hand reaches out to pull you to safety. He can save you long before you get close to the edge of your cliff, but that's often not the way it works. It's a faith test. He wants to see if you really trust him to do what he says, or kind of maybe if you can see your way out of your predicament, trust him. So if you're tithing and being prudent with your money, but times are still tight, relax and wait for the pot of gold that's sure to come. You get more heavenly points for expecting your windfall than doubting its arrival. Reading what the Bible doesn't say. If you claim to be a Christian and you don't tithe, God may close the windows of heaven like he did for me and make sure that financial blessings don't come your way. Now for a couple of my least favorite verses in Proverbs. Verse 11, My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as a father the son in whom he delighteth. If you want God to be your heavenly Father, understand that when you aren't making choices that please him, you're going to get some heavenly discipline. The good news is that it's all for your own good. The Apostle Paul knew all about this concept and quoted this verse in the New Testament, in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 5. And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. If ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then ye are bastards, and not sons. Furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh, which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits, and live? For they verily for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure, but he for our profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Interesting that Paul notes, if you're doing things that deserve some punishment and not getting any, then you're not a child of God. People always want to know how to tell if someone is really a Christian. One way is to look at their life and see if God is correcting them when they go astray. Back to Proverbs, verse 13. Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and the man that getteth understanding. Translation? Happy is the man that has found the spirit of wisdom, who directs him in making super smart actions. This guy says the right thing at the right time, every time, makes great decisions about everything from business to dealing with people, and has clarity about everything. His eyes are wide open, full of realization about how things work in his personal universe. For the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things thou canst desire are not to be compared unto her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her, and happy is every one that retaineth her. Wisdom comes from a spirit. If you find her and the subsequent good decision-making ability, Solomon rates that as being more valuable than anything you can imagine. It's easy to see why. Good decisions are the foundation for happiness, fulfilling days, wealth, riches, honor, pleasantness, and peace. Each of these attributes on their own aren't in themselves the formula for a great life. They're the fruits of good decision-making. You're not going to get a life full of happiness, fulfilled days, wealth, honor, pleasantness, and peace without making good decisions. That would be like expecting your field to sprout spinach when you haven't planted a single spinach plant. It's not going to happen. Notice that Solomon doesn't say, happy is the man that findeth money. Not that we don't mind having some extra cash. We just want to get it the right way, by making good choices. Money doesn't generate long-term happiness. Good decision-making does. Verse 19, the Lord by wisdom hath founded the earth. By understanding he hath established the heavens. By his knowledge the depths are broken up, and the clouds drop down the dew. Here Solomon is presenting God's credentials. He's also letting us know our universe didn't just pop into existence. God had to think about the design process, evaluate the best options for each facet of what he was envisioning based on his knowledge of how to create different kinds of matter, celestial bodies, and on earth, tie everything together with gravity and implement a course of action that would result in a perfect world. For those of you who might think we evolved from monkeys, Solomon is setting the record straight. God made the earth and the universe and nature's perfect order. Like the process of water from the ocean turning into moisture, feeding the clouds that rain to keep our plants green, and mountains full of snow that melts, giving us water to drink all year long, I think Solomon is trying to point out that if an eternal being is smart enough and knows enough to put together the universe, he's smart enough to be able to handle any problem you might have in this life. Verse 21, my son, let not them depart from thine eyes. Keep sound wisdom and discretion. So shall there be life unto thy soul, and grace to thy neck. Then shalt thou walk in thy way safely, and thy foot shall not stumble. When thou liest down, thou shalt not be afraid. Yea, thou shalt lie down, and thy sleep shall be sweet. Solomon lists 4 benefits to those who keep sound, code for protect, wisdom, and discretion. Discretion can be defined, in short, as tact, the good judgment and sensitivity needed to avoid embarrassing or upsetting other people. Number 1, a wise and discreet man is safe. Number 2, a wise and discreet man doesn't stumble. Number 3, a wise and discreet man is not afraid. Number 4, a wise and discreet man sleeps well at night. What a contrast between a wise man and a fool. Verse 25, be not afraid of sudden fear, neither of the desolation of the wicked when it cometh. For the Lord shall be thy confidence, and shall keep thy foot from being taken. Keep in mind these verses are not suggestions. They're commandments. We are not to be afraid of anything or anyone except God. Can you think of some times when you've had sudden fear? Number 1, the stock market crashes. How about number 2? Terrorists hit the World Trade Center with 2 planes. How about number 3? Your boss calls you into his office. Or number 4, if you're a kid, the principal calls you into his office. How about times when other people around you have been destroyed? Number 1, the economy is terrible and your neighbor loses his home. Number 2, at work, someone doing the same job as you is laid off due to a lack of work. How about number 3? This actually happened to me. A mystery stalker murders a woman living next door to you. Or number 4, a car jumps the center divider and hits the car next to you head-on, killing the driver. Or number 5, someone you know very well has a heart attack. Verse 27, Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it's in the power of thine hand to do it. Say not unto thy neighbor, Go, and come again, and tomorrow I will give, when thou hast it by thee. Solomon says, pay what you owe on the due date when you have the money. This might seem obvious, but even 2,700 years ago, when this was written, people still tried to put off paying their bills. If you're one of those people, you aren't wise. Verse 29, devise not evil against thy neighbor, seeing he dwelleth securely by thee. Strive not with a man without cause, if he have done thee no harm. It's easy to get jealous if your next-door neighbor is doing really well and you're not. They might have just purchased a beautiful new Mercedes when all you can afford to drive is your decade-old Honda Civic. They might go on a week or two vacation to Europe when you haven't had a vacation to anywhere in longer than you can remember. Solomon knows that it's easy for unsuccessful people to hate successful people. So he addresses it two ways. First, don't think of ways to hurt your neighbor, including your neighbor's property, and don't fight with someone that hasn't done anything to hurt you. Verse 31, envy thou not the oppressor, and choose none of his ways. You might be bigger and tougher or better at throwing insults than your neighbor or schoolmate, but if he hasn't done anything to hurt you, leave him alone. Don't be a physical or a verbal bully. Anyone who acts like this is not wise. Verse 32, for the froward is abomination to the Lord, but his secret is with the righteous. Froward people are habitually disposed to disobedience and opposition. They jig when they're supposed to jag. Interesting that Solomon realized that wisdom is like a secret reserved for the righteous and hidden from oppressors, froward people, wicked people, scorners, and fools. Verse 33, the curse of the Lord is in the house of the wicked, but he blesseth the habitation of the just. Can you imagine living through life with God's curse on you? He knows ways to make you miserable that would make your skin crawl. Wise men don't want God's curse, so they avoid wickedness like the plague. We want God's blessing and all of the perks that come along with it. Verse 34, surely he scorneth the scorners, but he giveth grace unto the lowly. What's a scorner? When you scorn something, you detest it and let people know by the stream of words coming from your mouth. In this case, Solomon may be talking about people who scorn God's laws, or perhaps those who are just plain mean. Kind of scary to think God would be carrying on a rant about you up in heaven. I want my Creator to say good things about me to his heavenly friends. Stay humble and you get God's grace. Grace can be thought of as undeserved favor. Nice to know God can give you a warning when you deserve a ticket just for having humility. Verse 35, the wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the promotion of fools. Think that glory is reserved for God and his angels? Think again. Glory is code for heavenly fame. Picture an Olympic athlete receiving a medal in front of billions of people on TV. That's glory. Now picture a wise man standing at the throne of God receiving a special combination, maybe even a heavenly medal with all of humanity, everyone who has ever lived watching. That's some serious glory. I want to be that man, and so should you. Just thinking to yourself, would I earn a heavenly medal for this? As you make decisions and take action in this life is a great way to stay at the top of your game. When I was in high school, I ran track. I was the fastest runner in the school, but for regular track meets against one other school where you just got a pat on the back for winning, I would come in second, third, sometimes fourth. But at the big invitational track meets where there were 20 or 30 other schools, which means 20 to 30 times the competition, you got a medal for placing in the top 3. At these track meets, I always went home with a medal, every time. I didn't try any harder to win, and I have no explanation as to why I ran so much faster other than my determination to get one of those medals. The funny part is I would smoke the same runners that beat me in the single school meets. My track coach and I often laughed about my accelerated speed when I knew a medal was on the table. But from this I learned a great lesson. People are motivated by rewards. If you know a medal is waiting for you if you win your race, it unlocks some sort of inner strength, and your determination to get that reward spurs you to greater levels of achievement than you would get without a perk. Solomon knows this truth and wants you and I to be ever mindful of the fact that heavenly fame awaits the wise. Paul lets us know that heavenly rewards are coming our way as well in the New Testament. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 3. Every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire, and the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. If any man's work abide which he hath built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. If you forget about the fame and rewards waiting for you, your performance likely won't be as good. Go for the gold.